So let's say you found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, everybody, we are here with Kent with Bent. What is this, 53 now? Yeah, this is 53. That's crazy, man. So this is Top Kent, of course, and we are here. We're hopefully going to finish up this CSE 101 Class 6, and I already have Class 7 downloaded. Why am I not seeing Bent here? You should be. Let me double check. You were here before.
I don't think I'm showing up either, but then again, like.
Who said that? Who guessed? Josh.
That's strange.
Your imagination.
So I'm gonna try and make it so I can see Bent again. Maybe that'll work.
I was there for a second.
Oh, there, I see you now. All right, it was just OBS being weird. So, yeah, OBS likes to just sometimes be a jerk, basically.
That it does.
Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know why, but whatever, it's fine. Okay, so now that we have the technical aspects sorted out, let's start talking about what we're doing. Because, hey, in case you guys are new, which you're probably not, but you might be, this is where we basically just have a few drinks and debunk Kenthoven while getting increasingly sloshed. Well, at least I do. Bent does not, because he's
either increasingly drunk or increasingly hydrated.
Well, yeah. And also we have, of course, with us Sphincter of Doom.
Hello.
Yes, he is our irregular but always appreciated guest. And so I'm seeing a lot of cool names in here. I'm seeing I'm a Red Whale 2, the Not So Electric Boogaloo, Jacob Maston, Mr. Wilford, T.D. Lane, Benthoven, no relation, of course, Icarus, Bradley D. Waters, Rosiah Hansen, Mind Onion, Monk Mayfair, my goodness, Dino King, 213, Maya's here, goodness, Silver Harlow's here. All right. So, of course, we're going to go over the drinking rules real quick. So, we take a drink whenever Kenthoven gets something right that he's not just quoting from someone. So he has to actually get it right on his own. Most of the stuff he gets wrong, but every once in a while he does get it right. It's usually at least once an episode. I don't think we've ever had an episode where that didn't happen. We also drink when it's just so stupid that I kind of have to save my own sanity. We also drink whenever Kenthoven tells a joke that just doesn't land. We also have a few semi-random drink triggers just to make sure that, we have some fun. One of them is that we drink whenever... There you go. Whenever Godzilla or one of his kaiju friends come by, there are... It's my first drink. There are a few ways to trigger that. One is one that my audience doesn't really get to know. The other one is, if you, in fact, super chat with one of the channel member emojis, one of which is Godzilla, the other one, or another one of which is Mothra, then we take a drink for that too. So there you go. That does not work on any show besides Kent with Bent. If you try it on like Leaving Young Earth Creationism or Debate After Show, it's not going to work. I've had a few people try, but it does not work. This is the only show where I have a drinking game, because it's the only show where I feel like Kenthoven is such an easy person to debunk that there's really no particular need to stay sober.
Although at the same time, you could say that anyone playing at home could have their own drinking game in the other videos.
Well, sure, but I do want to. Well, I also do the same drinking game for Eric with Erica, but Eric Hoven is basically the same human as Kenthoven. I do want to point out, though, that we do not, in fact, encourage you to play along with the drinking game, and we accept no responsibility or liability for any injuries to yourself or any damage to property up to and including destruction of property or death or dismemberment. Not my fault. I do not encourage you to play along, but you may if you like. So, unless anyone else has something else to add to this, we do actually have a couple of obscure drinking triggers. One is things that didn't happen. When Kenthoven just makes up a thing that didn't happen and tells us it did. We also have one for correct prediction. If you know exactly where Kent's going with this, you tell me beforehand, well, we drink for it, so. Those are the least frequent, though. All right, here we go.
So 2 obvious questions should come up. Why is there oil in the ground?
Because dead things get crushed, mostly plants.
It's
And
too
the
heavy
ground-
to be in the sky. That's why.
The ground is very good at crushing things.
Yeah,
The things that are crushed tend to be below the ground.
yeah. It turns out that rock is heavy, and if you're under a whole lot of it, you're under a lot of pressure.
Where did it come from?
Well, we already answered that.
And why does it still have pressure?
Because there's nothing that would cause it to not have pressure because it's still underground.
Because everything down there is under the same pressure.
Yeah.
Because that's how pressure works. Kent?
Nearly all scientists agree that oil comes from organisms, living organisms, that are squeezed and
Well, dead organisms, but okay.
heated. Under pressure and heat, you can convert a ton of garbage to oil in a few minutes. There's a good
Maybe in a lab.
Yeah.
article in Creation magazine, Creation ex nihilo. If you get the 1990 edition, I believe is where it is.
1990, the latest in creationist research.
So Impact article number 155 are some good ones to read if you want to study. And Eric, you should do this. Definitely read up on oil formation. Scientists can take a ton of garbage and squeeze it into oil in the laboratory in about 20 minutes.
That's true. Scientists can also vapor deposit diamonds in a few days. Doesn't mean it happens that way in nature. In fact, we know that nature doesn't vapor deposit diamonds at all. Like, okay, there's this twin thing that happens in a lot of pseudoscience nonsense, like young Earth and its, little brother, flat Earth, right? There's 2 things. One is, when a scientific experiment is designed to replicate reasonable natural environments, both creationists and flat earthers will be like, oh, well, that just proves you can do it in a laboratory. Okay, but the laboratory was set up to emulate real world. It doesn't matter. That just proves it takes intelligence. Okay, sure. Well, then in other cases, where you do something in a lab that is intentionally not anything like nature, well, it just proves you can do it real fast. So maybe it happened that way in nature. I was like, no. Why are you so bad at this? Why do you make opposite mistakes? And I know why. It's because they'll make whatever mistake lets their crazy, insane nonsense be true.
I mean, creationism at its core is just an enormous exercise in special pleading.
Yeah, it's true. All right, here we go.
They did a test where they took some organic material. Now, the word organic means something that used to be alive.
Okay, time to drink. Josh, I'll let you take this one, being the chemical engineer.
Yes. So the word organic can sometimes refer to things that are alive, but in the case of this, it's referring to a carbon-containing compound, of which all things that are alive, like the living parts, most cells are mostly carbon, at least they all contain carbon.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So
That's also where the oil comes from, because it's mostly hydrocarbons, and by weight, it's mostly carbon.
So if I were to say find a giant cloud of methane out in space in the Milky Way, which, astronomers did find, that would be a big cloud of organic compounds, right?
Yes.
Okay. Even though most likely no living things made a giant methane cloud in space.
Yes. And to our knowledge, there are no methane-based organisms either. Like their genetics or their main body structures are composed of methane.
Oh, and by the way, Griffin Hunter points out that nihilo is not pronounced nihilo. And so here's the thing. As long as Kent isn't purporting to teach Latin, I'm not going to get on him about Latin pronunciation. It's sort of the same thing where, if you mispronounce a dinosaur name or something, but it's reasonable, like a lot of people say Deinonychus instead of Deinonychus, which is what it should be. I don't really care. I'm not going to call you out on it. Unless you're like, oh, I can say all these words and I'm going to teach you how to properly pronounce them. Then I will. But since he doesn't tend to do that, I'm not going to get on him about it, because I really only get on Kent about things that he tries to be an authority on and that he gets wrong, which is still a lot. So, but you are correct. It is not pronounced nihilo, and Kent did pronounce it that way.
It almost sounds like that Mormon tablet.
Oh, the books of Nehi and Lehi?
Yeah, like
Nephi?
I always heard it pronounced ex nihilo, but that might be wrong too.
Whatever. Look, no Romans are going to come up and bop you on the nose for getting the Latin wrong.
Whew.
Plus, the pronunciation that you hear in a lot of church circles for Latin is ecclesiastical. Oh, there's Mothra.
Yeah.
Plus, the ecclesiastical Latin pronunciation that you'll get in a lot of like church circles, like it's the pronunciation used in the Latin Mass in the Catholic Church and stuff like that. That is actually basically like a medieval Italian. Like you're reading the words as if you were speaking medieval Italian. The linguistic reconstruction is actually a much simpler phonology, believe it or not. And it doesn't actually resemble that much. So even now, there's like more than one standard for how to pronounce Latin, and who cares?
Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I mean, Rome was in Italy, so it's bound to have elements of it, right?
Well, I mean, Latin turned into, Italian, but it also just as much turned into French and Spanish and Portuguese and Catalan and Occitan and Romansh and Romanian and a few others that no one ever knows about. But here we go, Kent.
Plants, animals, okay, is organic.
Well, mostly plants in the case of oil, but sure. There's probably some animal bits in there too.
Oil is, almost everybody agrees, comes from organic material. Plant or animal or human.
Oh my goodness. We're going to get into blood oil. I can't remember the blood oil name of the guy off the top of my head. TD Lane, help me out with the blood oil guy who says that there's human blood in oil. If you test it, you'd find human blood. Which, by the way, why has no one started the band Blood Oil? Come on, guys. Get on it.
You guys want to start a band?
How many bands are you in now?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Pressure and heat will change to oil. Hitler. It is.
How are we already back onto Godwin's Law? Oh my goodness. Kent, do you... I'm just taking a drink. I can't with the Godwin's Law.
And he just does it. He just jumps to it so fast.
It's like, hey guys, look, oil. Now let's talk about Hitler.
No.
Oh,
he doesn't even do that.
And Mr. Wilford.
He ends a sentence, and then he just starts the next one with the word Hitler.
And then there's T.D. Lane helping me out with McQueen. And Mr. Wilford helping me out with McQueen. Thank you very much. Yes, McQueen is a creationist who says that if you were to test crude oil for human blood, you would find it in there.
I guess you could argue that maybe sometimes some poor human got injured on an oil rig and their blood got into the oil. But I mean, the Carboniferous period is well before the existence of humans, as I recall. So
yes.
I don't understand.
Well, that's the thing. McQueen doesn't think that. He thinks that all the oil formed during the flood, and that's when the humans died too.
Reported some of the Jews that were killed. He took the bodies and had them baked to produce oil.
What?
For his tanks.
Citation, Kent. You're going to need a citation for that, because I've never heard that. That doesn't seem possible that you could burn a human to make oil. That would just get you a bunch of charred ash and bones, because, spoilers, bones don't really burn. But also, for $10 from Mr. Wilford, we have blood is not in oil, and even other ICR scientists disagree and think it's all plant matter from the flood. Lol. Yeah. Yeah, McQueen is a crazy man.
So even if after you you're right, cremation, the remains of cremation are mostly pulverized bone that is ashy in appearance, but at the same time there is some people that try to be all romantic and take their cremated remains of their loved ones and have them pulverized into diamonds, which but
yeah, I've heard of that.
But I've never heard anything about making oil from that. That's for me.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'll tell you what, if anyone can find any citation where it's even possible to turn humans into oil, now not that I'm putting it past the National Socialist regime, right? If that were a thing that they could do, I'm sure they would, if it were actually effective. So I mean, sure, maybe that would be a thing they would do if it were possible. But
if I'm going to take a guess that he misread something metaphorically, where the German war machine was built on the backs of dead Jews, and he just ran with that in a literal sense, and they need oil for tanks, that I feel like that's probably
maybe
that's the only way I could try to reconcile what he said with reality.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we go. We're gonna get some more in.
I don't know. I can't verify the story, but I've had.
Oh, you don't say, Kent. You can't verify. I'm taking a drink. I just can't with you, Kent. I can't verify the story, but
allegedly you can turn human fat into biodiesel, but it's
not by burning the corpse, though.
It's turning triglycerides into what is it, ester and glycerol, and I don't understand.
That sounds like forming the bio part of biodiesel. Like you still have to combine it with crude oil.
I don't the oil.
Paul Nolan in chat said, "Ugh, I just realized I need a drink for Hoven." I mean, I don't know why you're just realizing that now. I realized it a year and a half ago.
Several folks tell me, yes, it's true, that they didn't do that with all of them, but they did it with some to see if it would work. They found it was too expensive to do.
Some folks said, yes, it's true. Well, guys, that's a citation. Some folks.
Okay. The pressure and heat produces oil. So I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say you can make a barrel of oil for $1,000. You take a ton of garbage, squeeze it, heat it, it turns to oil.
No, what you do is you sell used
I can
gas.
buy a lot cheaper than that.
You sell it as used gasoline, so it seems like they're getting a discount because it's used.
So you're just selling like dry ice and water?
Yeah.
Okay.
One person said to me the other day, why don't they make oil that way, cut the price of gas? I said, well, you can drill and pump the oil out of the ground for about $20 a barrel. If they start producing it for $1,000 a barrel, your gas is going to cost, $1,000 a gallon.
You know what? I will take a drink for Kent getting the basics of supply and demand and production cycles right. So good job, Kent.
But then he said that at $1,000 a barrel, gas would cost $1,000 a gallon.
Well,
I mean, sure, that's like if it's crude oil, there's more that goes into.
I'm trying to be extremely generous. Kent Hoven got the very basics of the idea of economies of supply chain and whatnot correct. So I'm giving him some credit. Look, I have to be generous or he doesn't get any credit. So
that's fair.
Better leave it alone, okay? It's still cheaper to drill it. The fact is it could be done. It just isn't practical to do that. So oil can form quickly. So the obvious question would be, how did the oil get way down there in the ground? 3, 4, 5, 6,000 feet down. 2 miles down.
It was laid down at one point and then later sediment. I mean,
subduction and sediment. I mean, that's what else? There's lots of stuff down there that wasn't there before.
Yeah, it's like, how did anything get down there? The same way.
Did not Dr. Kent not ever take a geology course?
I don't think Kent has ever actually really been to any... I'm not even sure
Any
Kent
college
graduated high school, honestly, given his absurdly poor grasp of the English language. Have you read any of his writing?
He might have.
I don't hate myself.
Yeah, well, I've read some things that he's written, and look, I've talked to people who, with good reasoning, have said that they are suspicious that Kent Hoven may be functionally illiterate. Now, I've seen him read live, and he makes a lot of mistakes reading out loud, but then again, I mean, I'm not seeing him read whole big texts.
Just they drill down 3,800 feet, I believe is the number, and they get into the seam where all the oil is. They can pretty well count on it. We drill down 3,800 feet, you're probably going to hit oil. In Kilgore, Texas, remember the oil museum?
Oh, hey, so I know I have some geologically inclined people in the chat here. Did you guys know that if you just drill down 3,800 feet anywhere, that apparently you just hit oil? Because, I mean, you might want to tell the oil companies, because if that's true, they've been wasting a lot of money on facies modeling to try and actually find where oil wells are. So, yeah.
Just write a little mark at the 3,800 depth thing, and then just drill down, and then,
Yeah.
They had 28 oil wells on 1 acre, the size of our property. They called it the world's richest acre. They pumped it for years and finally pumped it dry. Today it's just a museum. Okay, there's no more oil, not enough oil on there to make it worth going after. But Sinclair Oil Company has the Dinosaur as their logo because they say the dinosaurs turned to oil.
It's because it's cutesy, and it's from millions of years ago and they're extinct. That's all it is. It's not.
So
Sinclair Oil Company isn't engaged in a conspiracy to teach people evolution.
So, as a side thing, supposedly, officially, Kent Hovind did graduate from East Peoria Community High School in Illinois in 1971.
Well, there you go. Good job, Kent. You don't seem like you graduated high school, but
as of 2018, that high school currently has 900 students. So I imagine it was a very small high school.
I mean, small high schools don't have to be bad.
That's true.
No shade on East Peoria for having a small high school.
And they're probably right. And they, these guys drill for oil all the time. Sinclair is still a very valid company.
Wait, and they're probably okay. Whatever. I'm just
mostly out west. You don't see them much here, but in Arkansas there are Sinclair gas stations, and all over out west, Sinclair Oil Company. The article, How Fast Can Oil Form? Creation Next to High-Low, Volume 12, number 2, page 30, talks about that. I've got this sign in my office from Sinclair saying dinosaurs have been mellowed for 80 million years. Now, slow down a minute.
That's also stupid. But...
Yes, the dinosaurs probably turned to oil, but it wasn't 80 million years.
No, virtually none of oil is made of dinosaur. I'm taking a drink. Yeah, Monk Fayfair is correct. Take a drink for Kent saying dinosaur into oil. Like, look, is there any part of oil from, like some Mesozoic oil formations, which do occur, that might be from a dinosaur? I mean, a little bit, but, it's still predominantly going to be plant, almost all plant matter.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that Sinclair is just going with the marketing of the common misconception that dinosaurs come from oil. So then, hey, this is natural oil. So it's just the marketing.
It's all natural oil. It's organic. Those are both things that are true. All natural, organic gasoline. It's healthy for you.
I think that all happened at the time of the flood. Very simple.
We know that.
You got a world full of people, full of animals, full of plants. Now you get a flood that destroys everything. The flood lasts for a year. At the same time as the flood's going on, you got volcanoes blasting ash and lava up, and you got all kinds of bad things happening to the earth. You're going to get all these carcasses buried under thousands of feet of mud, sediment.
So in this cartoon, we've got a human mummy with all these dinosaurs. It's curious how we never actually find that in the actual rocks, isn't it?
My knowledge of which dinosaurs are from what period is rusty, but I don't think those two dinosaurs are from the same period.
I mean, the sauropod is unidentifiable. They're certainly not from the same period and same area. There weren't really any, T-Rex probably never met a sauropod, but there were still sauropods around. They were just mostly in much farther south than T-Rex lived. In many cases, they were all over South America, to be fair.
Debris, rocks, lava, ash. The pressure, how much does a cubic foot of water weigh? A gallon is 8 pounds. 62 pounds. 64, 62 pounds, okay, depending on...
I have no idea if that's right, but it doesn't sound wrong.
I don't... Yeah, maybe.
What kind of water it is, salt water, etc.
Why not just go with a gallon?
Dude, I don't know. I mean, he asked what a square foot of water is. I mean, that has an answer.
Or a cubic meter. I mean, let's...
Isn't that a metric ton? By definition?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
If you lay it on the ground and I put a box 1 cubic foot on top of your stomach and filled it full of water, 62 pounds. Let's stack up 10 of those boxes. 10 feet of water puts 620 pounds of pressure per square foot. Let's stack up 100 of them.
That's correct.
Yep, that would be how that works.
6,200 pounds of pressure.
There's Monk Fayfair. This is why Imperial sucks. That's true. And Monk Fayfair also said that T-Rex never met a Stegosaurus. So the time difference, the time between Stegosaurus going extinct and T-Rex coming around is significantly longer than the time frame between T-Rex going extinct and you being born.
Per square foot, right?
Wouldn't it be different if you were surrounded by water?
If you're down in the water, yes, it's different. However, your eardrum is a little piece of skin stretched across...
A drink for saying the eardrum is skin.
an air pocket inside. That's why when you go down in deep water, the air pressure pushes on your eardrum and stretches it, pushing it in. And you have to go slowly so your air inside your head, in your station tube, can equalize the pressure. That's why when you go up and down the mountains, you have to hold your nose and blow, to pop your ears.
Yeah, it's broadly correct. I'll take a drink.
Pressure. scuba diving,
he
especially if you have sinus trouble, you have trouble scuba diving because, you know...
Well, I don't know about that, but he knows how to equalize pressure between the external environment and your inner ear.
Well, he did talk about how you had to rise from coming underwater not too quickly for the same reason, because of the pressure equalization. And I mean, so he provided a good example of Boyle's law, even if he didn't understand it.
Yeah, well, that is true.
Your ears will never equalize. Who cares, right?
Divers care, mountain climbers care, but whatever.
Pilots
rock
care.
weighs more than water, right?
Well, there's pumice. Pumice weighs less than water.
It's true.
But I will admit, most rocks do weigh more than water. That is... While there is an exception that I'm aware of, it's not a lot. Actually, hey, Mr. Wilford, if there are any other rocks besides pumice that weigh less than water, you let us know.
I mean, if you go with the Monty Python reference, very small rocks do float.
That's true, yeah. That's a good point.
Let's say a cubic foot of rock weighs 100 pounds. It's probably a lot more than that, but let's just pick...
It's going to depend on the rock, Kent.
A number. 100 pounds per cubic foot. Let's stack it up 3,000 feet deep. How much pressure is it putting on 1 square foot 3,000 feet down?
Is that a quiz question, Kent?
Probably.
Is that 300,000 pounds per square foot?
Yes, Kent, underground there's a lot of pressure. No one is disputing this. Get to a point.
Just explaining it as slowly as you possibly can, that it's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yes, yes it is.
3,000 feet. Oil is anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 feet down. So the pressure of the rock above is enormous, plenty, and since it's just pressure, pressure produces heat. So you got exactly what you need.
Kinda. Changing pressure can change heat, but like just being under pressure doesn't mean heat. It's not that simple. Like, so for instance, if you have like a gas storage canister, right? So you've got a bunch of really highly pressurized, say like, I don't know, carbon dioxide. Like, oh yeah, like those, you know, the soda stream bottles that you might have? You press the button and it injects the carbon dioxide into your water, and now you have sparkling water, and then you add whatever syrup, and now you get a soda. So those things will tend to be at room temperature, just hanging out there. But when you fill one, which I don't know, you don't fill those at home, right? You buy new ones and they're filled at a factory or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when they fill them, they will get hot. Oh, and hello, Alexander Lorda 2, and David P. Neff, and Emotionally Mimetic Psychopath. I see all of you in there. Thank you for showing up. So yeah, when they fill them at the factory, they're going to get hot, right? Because you're shoving all of that pressure in there. And one of the things that's going to do is it's going to do things like increase the amount of interactions they have with the walls and increase their average speed. And so that's what temperature is. And then when you release that carbon dioxide into your water, that chamber is going to cool off. But just being under pressure, it will equalize the temperature to room temperature. Most of the time, one of those little pressurized gas canisters is just going to be at normal pressure. Changing the pressure is what causes heat or cold to come around.
Another good example is the propane tank for your grill. While it's just sitting there, if the pressure was causing heat, eventually the propane would just self-ignite. But that's not what happens.
All right.
It's just sitting there at room temperature.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Wilford. You didn't even have to super chat that. I totally would have read it if you had just added me. But I really appreciate the super chat. And Mr. Wilford says, for $20, pumice is the only floating rock I know of. Other rocks are very low density, though, but they still sink just slowly. Limestone, quartzite, and granite are all very low density. Meteorites have been known to float rarely. Okay, wow, that's interesting. I've never heard of a floating meteorite. That's kind of cool.
I guess they would form with an air pocket inside.
Dude, I don't know. I have no clue why that would happen. I always thought of meteorites as being mostly just hunks of iron, so.
Yeah.
But then again, Mr. Wilford is the one who's in school to be a geology guy. I'm in school to be a drunken Kenthoven debunker? I don't know. Just a guy who...
We have debated
has the show. That's true, I have debated Kenthoven. I almost debated him twice, but then he was like, unless I can dox you, no. And then I said, okay, no.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to debate Jackson Wheat this week, but then he just bailed.
Need
Can you blame
pressure
the
and
secretary again?
Well, he could have, because it's a new secretary since when I debated him. Dude goes through secretaries like some people go through socks. Apparently, Monk Mayfair says, I've never read Tintin. So, I've read a few Tintin books, but it's been like since, what, 20, 25 years or something?
To convert whatever was buried to oil. If they can do it in the laboratory in 20 minutes, it certainly can change in 4,400 years from buried carcasses into oil.
That does not follow. See,
Right, because I'm assuming that the reason he assumed, like, you can't just assume that the conditions of the laboratory are the conditions that was occurring in nature. Unless there's
that's the thing.
something.
See, these laboratory experiments are generally designed to how fast can we possibly make oil. That's a separate question from how fast does oil form in nature. So
that's where the oil came from. I believe the oil came from the people and animals that drowned in the flood.
well, good for you, Kent. That's stupid, but good for
Go to the
you.
gas station, you can say, "Bye, Grandpa. You should have listened to Noah." He told.
What did he believe before this was demonstrated in the lab, though?
Oh, I don't know. But also, no one who drowned in the flood, like, let's say the flood story is true. No one who drowned in the flood would have been your grandpa. They would have been like Noah's distant relatives.
Told you it was going to rain. And that's probably what happened to the people that did not listen to the Lord. One more thought here, young earth, and we'll take a quit for the evening. In Denver, Colorado, I was preaching out there, and some guys came to the meeting. They said, "Now, Mr. Hovind, we know you teach the earth is only 6,000 years old. We would like to prove to you that you're wrong." I get this just about every week. You probably will too, right? These guys worked at the Denver National Ice Core Laboratory. Denver National Ice Core Laboratory.
Okay.
It is a section of the Federal Center in Denver, Colorado. What you're seeing here is a picture of a giant freezer. This freezer is enormous. The guys who brought me into this freezer, it's 36 below zero in there all the time. You know, taxpayers are paying the electric bill, so, you know.
So, Donut Space says that this sounds like a fake story, and it kind of does, but so far it hasn't been completely crazy, like his 300 meteors per hour story. So, it might be a things that never happened drink, but let's find out.
Set it where you're comfortable. The freezer is enormous. These were the guys that go to Greenland and drill holes through the ice. They also go to the South Pole and drill holes. The Russians are doing this too. They take these, it's called a coring machine. Here's a picture of one here. It's like a pipe. It drills down, maybe a 4-inch pipe. It drills down just the outside. So the center part is not disturbed. It's called a coring machine. I asked him, I said, now when you're drilling a pipe down to the ground and you pick it up, doesn't the piece fall out? They said, oh no, they showed me the thing, how they do it, the drilling machine. It's got little flaps in there down to the bottom. When they stop turning, as soon as they start to lift up, these flaps come in and catch.
Well, that was actually a good question, Kent. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
So they drill about a 6-foot section at a time. They drill down. As soon as they start to lift it, it snags the bottom and breaks it off. So they pull up a 6-foot piece of ice about this big, slide it into a tube and mark it. This is number, 813 or whatever it was. Then they can go back to the laboratory and put them in order and reassemble it. So they have a huge long core of, just as if they laid it out from drilling down. The deepest hole they ever...
Oof. Tyler West says, you debated Kent like 2 wives ago. Time for another debate. Not wife. Well, he's already lost wife number 3, apparently. Yeah.
I thought wife 3 was, or maybe is wife 2 like his side piece that he lost? Like, it's hard. It's so hard to keep track anymore.
Well,
as far as I know, he's only been divorced once.
Yeah, but he's still
married to 2 women right now, I think.
Yeah, and one of them is now gone. Cindy Lincoln has not been spotted on the property for a while now, and Kent Hovind has recently been going on about how 2 things. One is, if you're having trouble with your marriage, you need to rekindle that fire, and also how important it is for women to obey men. The exact kind of thing that he likes to talk about around the time that Mary Toko left him.
Gotta rekindle that fire with someone else.
Yeah.
drilled is 10,000 feet. through this ice with this coring machine. Actually, they set up a big building over the top to stay warm while they're doing all this work, and they may live there for 2 months while they're drilling a hole, just so they can have some more ice in Denver. That's what they need. But this newspaper article said, in Lakewood, Colorado, a Denver suburb, Associated Press, 10 ice core samples yanked from a remote Antarctic glacier are resting in a giant freezer here waiting to be tested. What do they want the ice out of the Greenland and South Pole for? When they drill down, here's the coring machine. You can see the teeth.
To test?
Yeah, I mean, it said it in the article. It's right there.
You just said it out loud, Kent.
I think that's just Kent's style, where like he's asking rhetorical questions as a means of segging to the next segment of the conversation. At least in this case,
They imply he's really stupid.
Well,
he's dumb.
Well, that, or maybe he's just dumbing things down for his audience because he assumes that about
He
his
does
audience.
talk like a 10-year-old would talk.
That it also might be that Kent is assuming too little about his audience, so then he's being dumber than his audience.
I think he thinks the way a 10-year-old thinks.
He does.
At the end, how it kind of grips it when it starts to pull it up. I drew these lines on here because you can't see it at this angle, but there are dark and light lines, which I'll show you in a minute. The guys took me in the freezer and they showed me these lines. Here's a photograph of one. You can see the dark and light lines. They said, Mr. Hoven, up in Greenland, it doesn't snow much, and it's really cold in the winter. In the summer, the snow melts just a little, and you get a layer of water on top. Then it refreezes in the winter and makes a clear layer of ice. Now, clear ice on this picture shows up as a dark line. If it never gets a chance to melt, the snow is going to pack or press down and make a white layer of ice. So they said what these layers represent is summer and winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. Well, that's not true, as we'll see. This rest of this newspaper article said, in Greenland and Antarctica, where the weather is consistently dry and very cold, the glaciers are miles thick, but the annual rings are very thin. Summer, winter. Now here's where the problem is right here. The deepest cores can measure over 10,000 feet. Cores from Greenland drilled since 1990 show the northern climate was erratic 135,000 years ago. All they do, you count back 135,000 rings and assume we can look at the weather patterns. Did they get more snow or less snow in Greenland?
That? Wouldn't it be 200? Wouldn't it be 207?
Oh, you just count up all the dark rings, and there you go.
Yeah.
It's like with a tree ring, right? You just count up the dark rings. You don't count every light ring as a separate ring.
Greenland. Well, what's the obvious assumption in all of this?
That the ice doesn't melt during the winter in Greenland, Kent. Pretty decent assumption.
That the rings are annual. Just because you got a
the
clear
way
line.
You demonstrated already that they are annual, Kent? Yes, that's the assumption.
Yeah. Tell you what, Kent, you let me know when you figured out when the midwinter thaw in Greenland was.
The white line, packed snow and melted snow, doesn't mean it's annual, does it?
Kinda does, unless someone was out there with their, you
Well,
know...
already said why it does, Kent.
Right. Unless someone's out there with their flamethrower, then it's going to be annual.
We know
it's
that
all
it's
those
not.
penguins that are just stomping on the snow, packing it.
All right, drink for Josh being dumb.
Not in Greenland, but I mean, like,
Yeah, because there are no penguins
no,
in
I
To be
understand.
Greenland.
fair, Kent
But
is
he's-
saying
but he's-
in Greenland and Antarctica in almost every sentence.
All right,
You
fine.
wait.
I still took a drink, though, because I was kind of thirsty.
I did too.
All right.
This is the Lost Squadron. I've got the book and the video if you want to watch it in my office. Stop by after class and I'll let you take it home and watch it. I tell you what, if you want to check out any of my stuff, Heidi, if you can kind of keep track of who does it, so we can be sure to get it back. Because I know how people are. They borrow and never return, you know. But I'll let you take my video home and you can watch about the Lost Squadron. It's very fascinating. Did you go with me, Eric, when we saw the plane? It's if you ever get up to Knoxville, just go north another hour and a half into Middleborough, Kentucky. You get up in that region. It's worth going to see. Get your picture taken beside it. Okay. Some airplanes ran out of gas during World War II. So they turned around and were going to land in Greenland. And the first one came in.
You know, emotionally mimetic psychopath asks a good question. Aren't some of the ice cores compared to other dating methods like tree ring dating? Also, carbon-14 dating. And yes, they are. And wouldn't you know it, they actually have high degrees of cross-correlation. Crazy, right?
Huh.
Yeah.
And flipped over.
Well, you could
Hit
say
it.
that instead of saying that, you could say the ice cores have a higher degree of fidelity than Kent Hovind does in his relationships.
Ooh. All right, I don't want to make too much fun of his relationships here. But yes, good burn.
Crack in the ice. He was fine. The guy got out, radioed back to the rest of them. He said, leave your landing gear up. Just come in and belly land. You know, because if you put your wheels down, you're going to flip it over. So the rest of them, they run out of gas. They've left their wheels up and slid in on the ice, and everybody's fine. I think one guy broke his arm or something, but I don't remember. It's all on the video. Anyway, these airplanes landed in Greenland. The guys waited there for like 4, 5, 6, maybe 9 days until somebody could rescue them. And it's a long story of how they almost froze to death. Anyway, the Eskimos came in there with dog sleds, got them, and took them out. Everybody's fine. They left the airplanes, of course. For one thing, coming in with your wheels up is not good on your plane. Your props hit the ice. Sudden stop on one of those motors is death to the motor. It destroys, bends the crankshaft and everything else. Who cares? Anyway, they left the airplanes. Well, some rich guy from Kentucky decided, we've got brand new World War II airplanes sitting up there. Vintage aircraft. He's got plenty of money, so he sent some guys up there to dig the air to get the airplanes. At first, they thought they might just brush the snow off the wings and, you know, gas them up, rebuild the motors maybe, and fly them home. They finally found them by using ground-penetrating radar. So much ice had accumulated over the top of the plane. The planes were under 263 feet of ice in 48 years.
Hey, Kent is broadly right. We'll take a drink. That is roughly what happened. And I'm sure I won't, in the next few minutes, have to take another drink for how stupid Kent is about to be.
They were P-38s and a couple of regular other fighters and a bomber, I forget what it was, but they especially wanted to get a P-38 because there's only a few...
Oh, and yeah, you know what? Another drink. Monk Mayfair made a correct prediction. So I'll take a drink for that. And Emotionally Mimetic Psychopath says, I thought the planes landed on an active glacier. Oh, they did. You're right.
in the world still flying from World War II that people have kept up. They've got a website for this called the LostSquadron.com, if you want to look up information on these airplanes that landed in Greenland. They melted holes down. They built this machine up there. They called it a gopher. They took copper tubing and wrapped it around and around and around and around.
Hey,
made a
copper
big, huge
tubing,
ring
Vince.
of copper tubing and pumped hot water through it. Kind of a cone shape of copper tubing. And they set this on the ice and they pump hot water through it. And of course it slowly melts its way down. As it melts down, they pump the water off and you end up with a nice, clean, dry hole. You get down about 60 feet or something and they run into a layer of, basically it's all water. It's still in ice, but it's water's coming in pretty quickly. And so they have to keep the pumps running continuously, pumping water out. They got some pretty heavy-duty pumps, too, because they're pumping up 263 feet. Takes a real heavy-duty pump. Anyway, they melted these holes down, took the airplanes apart, took one of them apart, and brought the pieces up through the hole. Imagine going down in a 4-foot hole, 263 feet, 26-story building.
Let me stop for a second. So the hole's 263 feet. Like, you don't necessarily need a heavy-duty pump. It depends on what pressure the pump is pumping that, because it's not just foot head. It's also like where I used to work. We had a tiny little 5 horsepower pump to pump a small amount of liquid oxygen to the top of a 200-foot column. Like I don't know all the details of this plan, but he's wrong there, kind of.
About needing
a heavy-duty pump to put, just because it's 260 feet. It depends on what the pressure is or the volumetric flow rate.
Things that Kent doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they did not need one or not, so maybe he's right.
That's true, but like based on what he said, simply because of the length of the feet or the height, that's not enough to know that you need a heavy-duty pump.
Right.
Yeah.
That'd be scary. Claustrophobia city. They were down in the planes were in the ice for 48 years, 263 feet. You divide it out, that's 5.5 feet a year.
Yeah.
10,000 feet is the deepest hole they ever drilled. Divide that by 5.5 feet per year, and you get 1,824 years. Now, the newspaper article...
Okay, well, here's where we're going to get into stupid stuff, so I'm going to take a drink. First of all, one of the most famous of that group of Lost Squadron was a P-38, now called Glacier Girl. Anyone want to take a wild stab as to why it's called Glacier Girl?
Because alliteration is fun.
I mean, that's one reason.
Because it was a girl?
No.
Because it was a glacier?
Well, it wasn't a glacier itself.
Is it because they landed on a low point in a glacier and then
I don't know if it was a low point, but they landed on a glacier, which is flowing ice, which means that all that ice that fell on top of them was in fact from the glacier. And here's the thing, you don't take ice cores from glaciers. You take them from pack ice that isn't flowing. Because otherwise, that whole assumption doesn't work. And further, glacier ice doesn't have those nice little banded elements. So if you had drilled down, you would have known immediately that you weren't looking at an ice core that could be used for dating.
That's why you don't take sedimentary profiles at fault lines.
Yeah. Further, this glacier was near the coast, whereas ice cores are taken from the interior because the coast of Greenland gets quite a bit of precipitation, but the interior gets virtually none. Which again, Kent knows because earlier he mentioned how it gets very little snow there. So if this ice, Kent, can be used for dating the same way the other ice can, if it's analogous, which you seem to think it is, otherwise your argument doesn't work, then how come you got that much snow when you already know that it doesn't snow much in Greenland? You've already contradicted yourself on this one, Kent. So that is why I took a drink, and you know what, I'm going to take a second drink, because that's extra stupid.
Whoops.
People said those the 10,000 feet represented 135,000 years.
I think this is a really good example of Kent Hovind putting the special in special pleading.
Yeah.
Where's the flaw in their logic here?
Nowhere.
They thought those were annual rings. And
Were there any rings in the ice core that you drilled from the glacier, Kent? Because apparently you've done that experiment, right?
they weren't. Now, some have said, if you lay a weight on top of a piece of ice, it'll sink right through the ice. If you put, lay a big block of ice on a table, and you put a weight on each side and a string going over the top, it'll cut the block right in half. How many have heard of that experiment before?
Pretty sure that's because of temperature differences?
Lay a penny on top of a block of ice, it'll sink down through and be frozen on top. It'll end up in the middle of the block of ice, frozen completely around it. This is true.
It'll
However,
sink.
that only
because
works.
metals-
Frozen on the top.
That's because metals have a higher rate of temperature conduction. So
Are you saying they have a higher coefficient for heat transfer?
yeah, it's kind of like when you're on the playground and the fiberglass bench is not as hot as the metal parts of the bench, even though the surface is about the same temperature. But one feels hotter than the other because
Yeah.
one is transferring more heat to you at a faster rate.
Stupid metal.
Yeah.
At room temperature. Some have said those airplanes probably sank in the ice. They melted down over the years just because of the weight of the airplane. Well, that's not true.
I agree, it's not true, Kent. I'll take a drink for that. That stupid thing that you just said that some people say is not in fact true.
Because, for one thing, airplanes are always built nose heavy.
Oh,
The front of the plane is
what?
you could just go with the fact that it's freezing cold there so they wouldn't be able to melt the ice. I mean, that could be the thing you go with. The actual real reason why it's not possible. But sure, airplanes are built nose heavy. Let's see how that works out.
heavier than the back.
I don't think
Why
that's
would they do
true
that way?
either.
What if your engines quit running? You want to glide in head first or tail first?
Well, I certainly want to be able to flare once I get close to the ground, so I don't want to be just continually nosing down. But maybe my control surfaces
But
can
you don't
overcome
want to
that.
stall either. It's almost like you want a balanced aircraft.
What?
But I don't
Yeah, so the nose is heavier than it needs to be to balance out the weight of the engine, so it tries to stay level and kind of glide. What?
Well, head first, right? So airplanes are always built with over 50% of the weight in the front. If those planes were sinking down because of gravity, they would be crooked. They're not. They're flat. Secondly, things don't sink through the ice based on their own gravity if everything is uniformly cold. That experiment with the penny through the ice will only work at room temperature.
There you go. Take a
And the
drink. You
planes were
got
not crooked.
Kent, good job. You got that one right.
He seems confused.
That is the
on
big
it.
reason. It's because it's freezing cold all over there. So, you know what? Good job.
They were flat. Bob Carden is the guy who dug out the airplane. He was in charge of the project. There's his phone number right there. I said, Bob, when you
Should we call it? No, we shouldn't.
I'm not going to call it.
went down to get the
Did he
airplanes.
dox him?
Yeah. You just give you his phone number and his...
First name, last name, city, state, phone number.
Yeah, that's enough to find someone's address.
Did you notice rings above the airplanes? He said, well, yeah. You can see them on the picture here. See the dark and light lines? I said, how many lines were there, Bob? He said, oh, we never counted them, but there were many hundreds of them. Now, how do you get many hundreds of annual rings in 48 years?
Because the coast of Greenland isn't the interior of Greenland. That's how.
You don't, do you?
Yes, you do.
Clearly do.
In a different environment.
Like, regardless of how those rings formed, that plane did crash 40x years ago, and there are that many rings there.
Well, now it's more like 50x years ago. Well, actually,
Right,
60.
but at the time of this video, at least.
Yeah,
so clearly, those many rings formed by whatever mechanism in that amount of time.
Yeah, the thing is, like, yes, the coast of Greenland gets warmer than the interior because it's near things like warm ocean currents. That's why the ice cores used for dating are taken from the interior. It's very frustrating.
Those aren't annual rings. That's not summer.
You're right,
winter,
they're not.
summer,
I'll take a
winter.
drink.
It's warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold.
Yes, Kent, now demonstrate that can happen in the far interior of Greenland. That's the next step you have to do. You have to get there.
Oh, you can get 20 of those in 1 week in Minnesota, can't you?
Well, okay, that's great for Minnesota. This is Greenland. Stick to that. Yeah, don't do that.
Sure you can. Those are not annual rings. Now,
yes, Kent, those rings were not annual. Now you have to extend it to showing that the actual rings that are supposed to be annual, the ones people think are annual, aren't because of some similar process. You have to find a similar process going on in the interior of Greenland, not on a glacier.
last February of '98, Scientific American.
Dapper Dino, this is Vesta Freya. I think we need a Father Ted thing doing the near versus far for Kent. Yes. Those cows are very, very far away. They only appear small.
In a major science magazine, an author published an article about the rings in Greenland, and he still called them annual rings.
Yeah, because they
This is
are.
8 years after they proved they weren't.
No. It's 8 years after other bands in ice, which were known already not to be annual because they're in warmer and wetter parts of Greenland, were found by some guy.
Now we have a problem here. Either the author is ignorant
That's true.
of the truth,
Mm.
or he's lying.
But no, actually.
He's certainly not right.
Yes, he is.
So hopefully he's just ignorant, because ignorance can be fixed. Okay? Stupid is forever, but ignorance can be
Yeah, of
fixed.
all people to talk about that.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, he did say stupid is forever.
Well, then I guess we're just kind of have to conclude that Ken Hovind is stupid because he's been fixed on things that he's been ignorant of and not fixed himself.
There's
Or-
some kind of
or-
stupid you just can't fix.
Or
Yeah.
he's lying.
Well, there is that. That would be the other possibility.
If he's just ignorant, we can deal with that. If he's stupid, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Those are not annual rings. This picture a guy sent me just a few weeks ago. He said, Mr. Hovind, I saw your tape. He said, I live in Alaska. He said, we had a snowstorm one night. In 8 hours, the snow piled up all over my car. He said, as I was cutting the snow in blocks to take it off my car, I noticed there's lines in it. He said, I got 15 layers of snow on my car in 8 hours.
So what? That's not compacted ice with clear layers from melts. What's next? Are you going to put out a layer cake and say, hey, look how many layers my cake has made in an hour while I put it in the oven? Who cares? All of these things are not the layers that you started talking about, Ken. I'm taking a drink. Now I kind of want a layer cake, even though I don't like cake.
Layer some nachos.
Those aren't annual rings.
No, they're not, but they're also not ice core rings from the middle of Greenland, Kent.
I mean, aren't some ice cores taken in Alaska as well? I might be
I
mistaken.
mean, probably, but it doesn't matter because they're still going to be taken from places with low annual snowfall and that don't tend to have melts during winter. Because those are the two things you need for reliable ice core dating. So those are the places you go.
Okay.
That's why you can get them in deserts, like the interior of Greenland and Antarctica.
What?
Yeah.
That's why deserts are chosen.
Right, cold deserts. That's where you go. Oh, Verlian, if you think this is the first time I've been annoyed during Kent with Ben, you just haven't seen enough of them. Feel free, there's 52 others.
Inuit Indians, he said, have 42 or 43 different words for snow.
That's correct.
It's not really correct. I'm going to take a drink.
Oh.
Okay, hold on.
So to what is he referring then?
They have so there's an urban legend that various Inuit native cultures have absurdly high numbers of words for snow. They don't actually. They tend to have more than is average for most languages, but they don't. They usually have somewhere around like 10-ish. But they do have a lot of words that involve the morpheme for snow in various compound words and verbs and all sorts of stuff, right? Which, okay, the word for snow is it's a lexically productive morpheme. That's basically what it comes down to. The word for snow in various languages like Inuktitut is morphologically productive. Or not morphologically, sorry, lexically productive. Hooray! So what? I mean, okay. Great.
There's soft snow, hard snow, crystalline snow, granular snow, slippery snow. Different words. And so in one snowstorm, you can get all sorts of...
People who live in an area where it snows all the time might have more than one word for snow. But not nearly as many as he reported.
layers in a hurry. So don't let anybody tell you that the Greenland proves the Earth is millions of years old. But invariably, when you do a debate or when you get into an email discussion with somebody, they will say the varves in the ice, they call it a var, V-A-R-V-E.
He got that right. I'm taking a drink.
Why do they call it that?
You know, I don't actually know what the etymology of a varv is, but you also get varves in lakes.
The varves in the ice prove the Earth is more than 6,000 years old.
The varves
and they probably really believe what they're saying, but they're wrong. Because they assume those are annual rings. We'll get into varves later, V-A-R-V-E-S, when they talk about the varves in...
So the etymology of varv comes from the Swedish word for revolution, or in layers.
Okay, I can see that. That makes sense to me. Cool. Well, that's why they call it that, because of Swedish people. Now I want meatballs.
Who are in relatively close proximity to places like Greenland.
Yes. There are also probably like ice varves in Sweden, because Sweden's cold. I don't know, maybe there aren't though, because it's not that cold.
Plus the history of Sweden and Denmark, who owns Greenland, is pretty
Denmark no longer owns Greenland, man.
True, but at the time of this video, they did.
Yeah, that's true.
Wyoming, Green River Formation. We'll get into that later on. Okay, next week we'll cover some more of it.
Well, since we're going to be watching it right now, we're going to go right into it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the intermission. I'm going to queue up the next video, and then we will be back with more Kent with Bent. This will be CSE 101 Session 7. And I've forgotten how many CSE 101 sessions there are, but there's like a CSE 102 and 103. So, like, we're not even close to being done with just the CSE 101 stuff. So,
yes!
Here we go. Nani? Dare? Oh, Ojira desu ka? Hai, Gojira-san. Hai. All right, we are back, and we are about to go with the next Creation Science Evangelism CSE 101 whatever course. So here we go. Class 7. That's some excellent formatting there.
All right, welcome to class. We're going to continue discussing the age of the universe, the age of...
Oh, the last one was in 360, but this is in stunning 480.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's why it looks so much crisper.
It makes his tie stand out.
Actually, that's a cool tie. Yeah, I like it. It's got this great like 60s dinosaur art feel to it. I like it.
Yeah, I will say that Kent Hovind certainly was, at least back then, a pretty he was a bit dapper. But nowadays he's like I'm just gonna do the short sleeve Hawaiian shirt kind of thing.
I don't know how I feel about you describing Kent Hovind as dapper.
But he's not as dapper as our resident dapper dino.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah. The Earth. We said last week this is an extremely important topic because if the universe is not billions of years old, the argument for evolution is over. You win in the first round.
I would generally tend to agree, yeah, that the whole idea of universal common descent is certainly over. Evolution per se, not quite, but since that's really tied in, yeah, I'll take a drink for that. Yeah, Paul Nolan says CRT style. Yeah, basically.
And we've been going through some of the different scientific ways to show the Earth cannot be billions of years old. But now we've covered things in space. Now we're going to look at things on the Earth, okay? We've covered just a couple in the last week. We're going to go through a few more. The Mississippi River, this textbook says, is depositing sediments at the rate of 80,000 tons every hour. It is known as the Muddy Mississippi. If you've ever gone to visit the Mississippi, any place in New Orleans or even south of St. Louis, it's just real murky water because there's so much erosion. A large drainage basin drains into the Mississippi, and lots of topsoil goes with it.
It's basically, yeah. Oh, take a drink.
The Mississippi is moving very slowly. It only drops 8 inches a mile.
I'm not sure about that, but it is a very slow-moving river, so I'll take a drink for that, too.
But how quickly it drops and how quickly it flows are kind of independent of one another, isn't it?
It's not completely independent. It's one of the factors, right? So, like, if you're dropping 20 feet a mile, you're going to be, all things being equal, you're going to flow more quickly than a similar river dropping 8 inches in a mile.
Yeah, it would depend on whether its depth remains constant or not.
Yeah, so given, like, all other things being equal, steeper slope means faster flow because of gravity. Ever heard of it?
Sounds like an evolutionist conspiracy theory.
Well, it's a globe Earth conspiracy theory.
Oh,
we all really know it's actually density and buoyancy, so...
And no one's ever found a graviton, so clearly we can't believe it's true.
It's a good point.
I don't believe in gravitons.
No? You're in the gravity isn't a force camp?
Yes.
Fair enough.
On the average, and it's 920-mile run from up north clear down to the New Orleans Delta. But as it brings this mud down there, eventually when it slows down, the mud drops out. Sediment drops out of the river, and it makes this delta. A delta is made of mud that a river carried in and then dropped off. As long as the faster.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. I'll take a drink for that. Kent Hovind dropping some knowledge for now.
Water moves, the more sediments it can hold, and the bigger chunks of sediment it can hold. As soon as it slows down, they drop off. Maybe you've seen up north where they put snow fences. How many have ever seen those before? The purpose of a snow fence is this blowing snow. As soon as it hits that fence, it slows down just enough that it drops the snow out of the wind. Because at a certain speed, the flakes fall out.
I haven't seen a snow fence, but I mean, that makes sense to me.
And you put the snow fence a certain distance away from the road, so it drops the snow, instead of on the highway, it drops it away from the highway. Well, moving water does the same thing. As soon as it slows down, it drops the sediments. That's why you see sandbars at places where the river turns and bends. It drops the sediments out and makes sandbars right there in the bends of the river. Mississippi River is dropping all this sediment in New Orleans, and it's making this delta grow larger and larger. The sediment, or the mud, probably really starts up near Memphis, Tennessee. All the rest of it is filled in with sediments, clear down to
that's true.
Oh.
Louisiana. Because it's all sediments, the whole state of Louisiana, or most of the state of Louisiana, is slowly sinking.
Wait, what? Because it's all sediments, the state is sinking. Those two things don't have to go together.
I think what he's trying to say is that there is an increase in the surface elevation of some parts, like around the river. So then, relatively, everything else around in Louisiana appears apparently lower. I think that's what he's going for.
I think he's thinking of erosion.
I think there's some kinds of stupid you just can't fix.
It's very difficult to build a highway and keep it strong across Louisiana. Drive over Highway 20 sometime and you'll see what I'm talking about. So every few years they got to repair it because it's on spongy ground. There just isn't a good way to build a solid highway. But this delta is growing larger. Estimates range from 10,000 to 30,000, so I picked a high number to be merciful to the evolutionists, to give them all the benefit of the doubt I can.
Thanks.
The delta is certainly less than 30,000 years old. The Mississippi changes course all the time. It used to, till the town of New Orleans became so dependent on the Mississippi. It's trying to change course again. Mississippi is trying very hard to bypass the town of New Orleans.
Okay, so the current course couldn't be older than 30,000 years. Got it. I'm okay with granting that for now.
And so the Army Corps of Engineers and all sorts of smart people have been out there trying to figure out how to keep the river in this channel, because it doesn't want to stay there. Maybe you've seen projects and stuff on the news about that, but they're fighting desperately, spending millions of dollars to keep it where it is. Because if that section of the Mississippi dried up, well, the whole town of New Orleans loses a lot of industry, because now their boats can't go, and it all goes back to money.
True,
Okay.
I'll take a drink. Yeah, sure.
But what's the point here?
Dunno.
The delta is about 30,000 years or less. So the obvious question would be, if the Earth is billions of years old, why isn't the whole Gulf of Mexico full of mud?
Man, I scratched myself today breaking apart some like fronds from a palm tree. So this scratch on my arm is about a day and a half old. That's how old.
You're a day and a half old?
Apparently. This is just that same argument. Oh, we found something on the Earth that's younger than the whole Earth, therefore the Earth has to be no older than the thing.
Well, the funny thing about this kind of argumentation is that simply looking at any living organism that we know didn't exist, a couple hundred years ago. It's just kind of odd. I guess he's limiting it to something geological, which I guess is a stronger argument than pointing to anything younger than what the Earth could be, but still, it's very...
How many times has this horrible, inconsistent logic in Kent's brain been pointed out to him? And he's still not adapted.
I don't know, but I'm going to have to go ahead and say it's probably
I think there's some
quite a
kinds
few
of
times.
stupid you just can't fix. Or maybe he is lying. There's no excuse at this point.
No.
Oh no! I think it was Aaron Ra who said creationists are either ignorant or dishonest. And
A number
he
of
has no
people have said something similar, but I believe his thing was creationist, honest, ignorant, or sorry, well informed. You can pick up to 2.
And I think with Kent, he has no excuse to have not been well informed at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So dishonest is
Well, he
probably the
still
one.
makes the same arguments now.
Yeah.
Like, what, 20 plus years later? He knows better. He's known better for a long time. Or he really does have the mind of a 10-year-old.
I'm going to go ahead and say he's dishonest.
Neither are good.
Now, the evolutionist will say, well, it's 30,000 years. That proves the Bible is wrong, because the Bible says 6,000 years. Now,
No, it doesn't.
if you look at
Well, yeah, but
typical secular textbooks, they will say there was an ice age 10,000 years ago, and there was an ice age 30,000 years ago, and there was an ice age 100,000 years ago. Where are they getting these numbers from?
dating techniques, geology, actually doing the work. Yeah, science.
I believe the word you're looking for is science.
Yeah.
Or at least a scientific explanation of the question that he's asking, as opposed to just speculation, which he's doing.
They're getting the 30,000 number from this delta.
What? What?
It's the first I heard of that. Also, even if he's right that 30,000 number for the Ice Age is at least supported by data from the Delta, that doesn't mean that it wasn't compared to other sets of data from using other techniques.
Yeah, I mean, I guarantee you, Kent, the age of the most recent glacial period is not dependent on the age of the Mississippi Delta. I'm just taking a drink.
There's such kind of stupid.
This is their explanation for why there's only 30,000 years worth of mud. They'll say, well, that was the end of the last ice age. That's their answer. Well, it could be there's only 30,000 years worth of mud out there because it's not millions of years old.
Yes, that is what you just said the mainstream explanation is. You just said that the mainstream scientists say that the Mississippi Delta isn't any older than 30,000 years because it didn't start forming until the end of the most recent glacial period. Which means they know it's not millions of years old, according to you, Kent. Why do you think this is a gotcha? I'm taking a drink.
He thinks it's a gotcha because he doesn't actually understand the arena. Like it's Dunning-Kruger all over again, where you can't even recognize when you're wrong.
Yeah.
They say the 10,000 years for the last ice age because of the Niagara Falls problem.
What?
That's their answer. Their answer is always, well, an ice age, reset the clock and started it again.
Is he just saying words he's heard before?
I think so.
Is this one of those conversations that never happen?
Oh, it could be. Yeah, I'll take a drink for things that never
There's
happen.
there's been a few potential of those already, so.
Yeah.
Well, maybe so, but maybe the Earth is not millions of years old.
Even if we take absolutely seriously your explanation for the age of these features on the Earth, that has nothing to do with how old the Earth is as a whole, because things can happen after the Earth forms, and therefore not be as old as the Earth, Kent. Like, you know this. You've watched things happen on Earth after creation.
The fact is, it's not full of mud. This is a picture of the oldest tree in the world. It's called the Bristlecone pine trees in Southern California. They're in the White Mountains, way up in the mountains. Very inhospitable climate. Very little rain. The Bristlecone pine, the largest one, they call it the oldest one, I'm sorry. They call it the Methuselah tree, is the nickname for it, for obvious reasons. The Methuselah tree is 4,300 years old. Now, you need to understand, tree ring dating is not an exact science.
I guess that's kind of true, but that's why it's compared to other dating techniques.
And no sciences are an exact science. That's why error bars exist.
None of that, but he says 4,300 would be the max. No, 4,300 would be the minimum.
Well,
that's the minimum age of the Earth, right?
No. He means for the age of the tree.
Oh, okay.
Trees, the rings on a tree do not indicate summer, winter, summer, winter. They can indicate lots of rain, lots of rain, no rain.
So, technically this is true, and I'll take a drink, but I'm pretty sure he's going to go in a dumb place with it.
It just happens to coincide with the fact that rate at which rain falls over the course of a year lines up with seasonal patterns.
Yeah.
I met a guy a few weeks ago at a church I was at. He said, Brother Hovind, I have been raising trees to make walking sticks, professional, expensive walking sticks for rich people. I didn't know there's a market for that, but that's what he does.
There's a market for pretty much anything.
It's true.
He carves these fancy walking sticks for people. He says,
Hey,
I
there's a
have
market
raised...
for snake oil.
But Kent Hovind doesn't sell it, so get it somewhere else.
Not literally. He
That's
literally
true.
does not literally sell actual physical snake oil.
That's true.
thousands of trees and made these walking sticks. He said, I raised my trees for 7 years, cut them down, and they always have an average of 11 rings in 7 years. Well, how do you get 11 rings in 7 years if they're annual rings?
Okay, so here's the thing. Tree rings are, it's true, not always annual. However, there are a couple things. People who actually do dendrochronology can actually tell the difference between a supernumerary ring and an annual ring. Supernumerary meaning a ring that grew as an extra ring during a growing season. Another thing is, I'm going to go ahead and guess that your tree farmer guy, by virtue of being a tree farmer, is raising these trees in idealized conditions to get them to grow as quickly and as efficiently as possible, because he depends on chopping them down at a certain schedule to make his walking sticks. Nature doesn't tend to grow trees at the absolute optimum conditions, because nature doesn't care about trees. Oh yeah, this is another, some guy told me a story, but this story doesn't sound crazy. I mean, he went to a church where a guy carved walking sticks, like, okay, I mean, nothing about that seems extraordinary to me.
If it didn't take place on a plane, he's less likely to be made.
Okay, so there's that thing right there. Dendrochronologists can tell the difference between supernumerary rings and annual rings. And here's the other thing. When you do dendrochronology, you compare different samples of wood to create a track of this whole timeline through history from different trees. And the thing is, trees of similar species that have similar growth needs in similar areas will tend to produce double rings on the same years. Because if the growth period is good for one tree in the area, it's going to be good for another tree in the area of the same kind. So you can actually correlate supernumerary rings and learn something about the climate while not messing up the dating on the dendrochronology. It's almost like people who spend their entire lives virtually doing nothing but looking at tree rings might be good at it.
Yeah.
What do you know?
It's like people who spend their entire lives lying to people might be good at it.
It's a fair point.
See, they aren't
He's a
annual
very
rings.
skilled liar.
So
You have to give him credit for that.
Yeah,
Give him credit for that. Yeah,
well, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but let's just say this. I would not be surprised if Kent Hovind, after seeing a psychologist, would be diagnosed with being a narcissist, which would explain why he's so good at lying.
Ring dating is a far cry from an exact science, especially with these trees because they're such a gnarled mess. I mean, they kind of grow this way a while, and then they grow this way a while, and it's just not a...
So what? That doesn't stop you from counting the rings from tree core.
Yeah, is he forgetting that dendrochronology looks at the trunk and not the branches?
Yeah, I don't know what his point is here. Like, okay, it's gnarly, great.
simple science for counting these. And you don't want to cut it down to count the rings, because then you found the age, but you killed the tree.
Yeah.
So they've got a special drill.
Maybe he's going to talk about it.
It's like a little pipe. It's hollow, and it drills a pipe into the tree.
I feel like this is a theme for this episode, is little tiny core samples taken from things.
Core, and pulls out the middle part, just like they do with the ice rings, only these are much smaller. The entire pipe is about the size of the lead in a pencil.
I don't know if that's true, but it seems reasonable.
And they drill all the way into the tree and pull out this real skinny core, lay it down, and they have to count the rings under a microscope. Because these trees grow about an inch in 100 years. So in an inch, you've got 100 rings to count.
Ben, do you use microscopes? How come you aren't doing dendrochronology?
Maybe I will.
Okay.
When you look at the trees, they're ugly. You will swear they're dead, but they're not. They're still alive. And they don't mark which one is the oldest because they're afraid souvenir hunters are going to go up there and say, I want to have a piece of this one. and there's only so many pieces of it you can get, and pretty soon it's not there anymore. But if you go up to the White Mountains in Southern California and see the bristlecone pine trees, the oldest one is 4,300 years old. Some will say, no, they found one that's 4,600. Some will say, well, by overlapping tree ring dating with tree stumps and logs found in Indian dwellings and stuff like this, the ancient cliff dwellings, they overlap these tree ring and they get a tree ring sequence that goes back 8,000 years.
Hey, Kent is right. You can do overlapping tree ring sequences and get back farther than he thinks the age of the universe is. Way farther than 8,000 years, but I'll take a drink for it anyway. Sorry, Josh, what were you going to say?
I was kind of gonna like, hey, he actually understands that it's not just blindly looking at tree rings. It's comparing it with amplifying data and basically isolating the variable that's trying to be measured. Science.
All right, here we go.
Well, this is real questionable because tree ring dating, first, is not an exact science. Secondly, two trees can grow side by side and have very different ring pattern. If there's a big tree and a little tree, the big one gets all the sunlight, the little one doesn't get any.
Yeah, but you can tell when things like that are happening, Kent. Like, it's pretty obvious. And when you get a consistent sequence of similarly sized rings and supernumerary rings that goes across the entire overlapping lifespan of a tree over, a few hundred years, where consistently both trees get big, same pattern. Big ring, small ring, double ring, big ring, big ring, big ring, small ring, big ring, small ring. Yeah, it becomes very unlikely that it's anything else but correlating actually the same years.
One day the big one dies, now the little one gets all the sunlight, so his growth pattern is much different. You can have two trees on opposite sides of the same mountain getting different amounts of rainfall. Because when air goes up, it drops all of its water. When it comes down the mountain, it absorbs water. It's called the rain shadow in Washington State. One side of the mountains is loaded with trees. As soon as you get over the top, it's basically desert.
So you're not going to get many tree cores from the other side. So who cares?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that's why deserts form, because as you get higher in elevation, the pressure drops and the rain falls before it gets to the other side. I don't understand why that matters.
I don't know, man.
Because as air rises, it cools and drops its moisture. When it comes down, it warms up and absorbs moisture. So you get what's called a rain shadow on one side of the mountain. And so trees can be affected by this. So what they've tried to do to discredit the creationists on this tree ring dating question is try to find tree ring sequences.
Okay, hold on. I'm taking a drink. No one in the scientific community, and I say no one with, sure, you might find a few. But generally speaking, the scientific community is not out there to discredit the creationists, and here's why. Creationism is not a threat to anything in science. Scientists barely even understand or even know that young Earth creationists exist. Right? Your average scientist is busy actually doing science, and they do not have time for the ridiculous flat Earth level nonsense that is young Earth creationism. Flat Earth and young Earth creationism are on the same level of plausibility. There is no actual scientific debate about young Earth creationism. The young Earth PhDs out there who pretend that they're going to have any impact are either delusional or they're lying. Mostly they're lying. There is, in fact, nothing going on in science that is being done to discredit young Earth creationism. The fact that science discredits young Earth creationism is a side effect, just like it is for the flat Earth.
Yeah, it's not like I imagine many people, that are going to work at NASA are encountering lots of protesters or people, moon truthers trying to hey, we need to debate this. No one, they're not.
Yeah, well, it's like when a young Earther says, oh, how come NASA isn't just doing a constant 24-hour live stream from, some satellite or something? Because they don't care about you. They have no interest in proving to you, a flat earther, something that has been known to everyone for thousands of years. Similarly, the average dendrochronologist or paleontologist or geologist has no interest in demonstrating to young Earth creationists something that has been known for hundreds of years.
Isn't there a 24-hour stream from the International Space Station?
But it has interruptions, you see.
Oh.
Yeah.
because of things not being perfect.
Yeah.
Satellite coverage isn't always 100%, and also, sometimes things kind of break.
Where they find a tree that has several rings, they look at the ring pattern where they're kind of close, and then they're far apart, then they're kind of close for several years, and then far apart for a few years. They would consider these to be the good years when it got lots of rain. These would be the bad years when it didn't get much rain. Then they find another log someplace else, and they try to line it up. So they got good years, good years, bad years, and this one will extend farther, and this one will extend farther this way. And so they've stretched their overlapping tree ring dating to, I don't know what the number is, probably close to 6,000 years. But this...
No, it's well beyond that, Kent. And while I agree that a sequence of, 6 or 7 rings that correlate isn't that impressive, there are cases where it's hundreds. Every extra ring in the length of correlation between any two logs is going to decrease the chances that this is just random noise that you're seeing that happens to line up. And when you do it across multiple logs from multiple trees, basically the chances of what Kent is saying here, where it's all just random things, which side of the mountain did the tree grow up on, and how the chances of that being an explanation drops to so low that it's crazy to actually consider it as a reasonable possibility. This is, you're getting into things like p-values, right, or sigma values, depending on which statistical method you're using.
This would be based on all sorts of very obvious assumptions, and it wouldn't hold up 2 seconds in a court of law.
Actually, no, it would, because like most sciences, you're reporting results that are in like the 3 or 4 sigma range. There is no reasonable court of law who would say, oh no, 3 sigma means nothing.
The problem is it doesn't have to hold up in a court of law. It just has to be taught in school.
No, it has to hold up in science, which actually has a much more rigorous standard, statistically speaking, for evidence than most courtrooms do.
By far.
Yeah. For instance, when the first signal was detected at the the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, that indicated that maybe a Higgs boson had been found, it was detected at, I believe it was a 3 sigma level, which basically means the chances of the signal being real and not just statistical noise were, what is it for 3 sigma? It's like, I think the chances are like 1 in 5,000-ish, I think.
When you say, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 sigma is 3 standards of deviation, right? Or am I thinking of something else?
I'm double checking.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 99.7% chance that it's not random.
Yeah, that is that's 3 standards of deviation, or at least it's the same.
Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. Any court of law would find 3 sigma or 99.7 chance of positive identification pretty darn good. Right? Like, that would be a pretty damning piece of evidence. But
beyond a reasonable doubt.
But did the scientists who thought they detected the Higgs boson and who were correct that they had announce it at 3 sigma? No, they waited until 5.
Jeez.
So science has a much higher standard of evidence than most courtrooms for most things.
I do think that, if I recall the timeline of that correctly, that they did find some signals that were promising, but it turns out that they didn't account for some aspect from nearby satellites or something like that.
Yeah.
But some media outlets reported it prematurely, and then later on they had to kind of retract it and okay, let's hold off.
By the way, the chances of 5 sigma, that 5 sigma is a real signal and not random noise, is 99.99994%. Yeah, that's the kind of standards that scientists like. That's way beyond what most courtrooms require. In fact, most court cases aren't criminal, they're civil. And you know how much you need to win a civil case? You need anything over 50%. That's it. So yes, Kent, this would line up in any court of law for almost any case that you can think of.
To convince the kids of it. That's where the problem comes in right there. So the oldest living tree is 4,300 years old. Now the creationist solution to this is very simple. There was a flood 4,400 years ago that destroyed the world. And it would have wiped out everything. However...
Okay, but the thing is, you finding the oldest organism doesn't indicate that anything in particular happened a bit before that, right? Like if I find the oldest human, and the oldest human is, I think, Last time I looked, it was like some old woman in Japan, but I think she's died since then, so I don't know who it is anymore. Whatever, it doesn't matter, right? And you find out that, oh, this person is 115. That doesn't mean something happened 115 years ago to reset the human ages, right?
Yeah.
It just means that that's about how long these things tend to live. So maybe it's just that bristlecone pine trees have trouble having their, actual stand of like a single trunk last much longer than 5,000 years.
The other problem is that even if there was a flood, a global flood 4,300 years ago, that tells us nothing about how many years there was between the formation of the Earth and that flood.
Yep. Also true.
Many trees can be uprooted, float around in a flood, and land, and start growing again.
Citation needed.
Do you drink for that?
No, because I don't know.
Go transplant bushes and trees all the time.
Yes, Kent, humans transport bushes and trees carefully by carefully excavating the earth around them, putting it back in. Then they usually still have a rough few years where like you have to tend them carefully because they go through what's called shock. I don't know if you know this, guys, but my grandmother was actually a pretty avid gardener. So I watched her repot plants and replant shrubs and do these things, right? It is not the kind of thing that just kind of happens accidentally. Oh, drink for Godzilla. Like, if you want to pick a plant up from one location and move it to another, it is not an easy or an automatic process. You have to do a lot of work to keep that thing alive.
Yeah,
the idea that it's just going to happen randomly is kind of crazy.
I think he's probably thinking of like when you go to your local nursery and it's just this little tomato plant. It's like, well, I mean, you don't even know how much work they put into potting that plant and getting it to where it could easily be transported.
But here's the thing: even with that, if you just plant that in the garden and leave it alone, there's a good chance it's just going to die.
Yeah.
Like, you need to be very careful when you're repotting plants or transferring plants to new parts of your garden or anything like that. Like, they can die so easily.
Yeah.
So in a flood situation, Noah was in the ark for over a year. That does not mean every square inch of the world was flooded for an entire year.
I will agree. Technically, that is not what that means. Sure, I'll take a drink.
It just means, all we know is Noah was in the ark for a year. Certain sections of ground might have only been underwater for a month. The crust of the earth would be lifting.
So in a month or so, that's when all those in situ clams and brachiopods grew on Mount Everest? Is that what you're saying, Kent? Because Kent thinks that the reason that there are sea fossils found at the top of Mount Everest is because they lived up there during the flood. So apparently that whole ecosystem established itself and then died in a month or so. Sure, that makes sense.
And sinking, and there'd be shuffling and water sliding back and forth, carrying sediments with it, lots of mud layers being laid down during this flood. So when I say the flood lasted a year, it's really technically more correct to say Noah was in the ark for a year.
No, if Noah's in a big boat that lands on a mountain for a year, then it's fair to say the flood lasted for a year. Because sure, not every single square inch might have been flooded, but there was a flood for a year, and it was the same flood. It's like, think about it like this, Kent. Let's say there's a local flood, right? The dam bursts, and I'm on a hill. And the hill only gets covered in 3 inches of water and only for a few hours. But the rest of the flood continues on for 2 days. How long was that flood? Was it an hour and only 3 inches deep? Or was it, a 3-day flood that in some places was, 20, 30 feet deep? Yeah, obviously it's the second one.
Yeah.
So I can't, how does Kent even get the flood story itself in his descriptions wrong? I don't get it.
He has to twist everything in his head.
Even
to
the
try and get it to make
Bible.
sense to him. He has to just twist so much stuff.
You can't.
Well, you see, Kent manages to stay in decently good shape for his age because of all the mental gymnastics that he does.
Those mental gymnastics burn a lot of calories, guys. I guess scientists all of them must just be fat. They don't have to do all these mental gymnastics.
The evolutionists ones are.
Oh.
He hit bottom in the 7th month.
No, he hit the top of a mountain.
Which wasn't the tallest mountain at the time, so you don't know what...
Well, yeah, presumably other mountains would have uncovered first, but...
Now, if you have floating log mats of stuff floating around that's been uprooted and drifting around, the seeds, of course, are going to be able to survive soaked in this water for a short time. And
A short time, yeah, but in most cases it would be months and months and months. I'll tell you what, put a bunch of acorns in brackish water for like 3 months and then just grow them. I don't know for certain what'll happen, but my guess is it won't be good.
I definitely don't know what would happen.
Well, I mean, we could get some acorns. That can't be that hard to do. Or hey, you know what, Ben? We live in a place where big old cacti grow. I wonder what would happen if you soaked a cactus seed in water for a month. I'm gonna guess it's probably not good for it.
Well, see, cactuses and pineapples, they actually have an evolutionary adaptation where they're not constantly trying to create those sugars, and they have a response to like, oh, now that the sun's down, we can do that. So if you flood them like that, then yeah, they're gonna starve.
Yeah, well, the other thing is most plants drown. I'm going to go ahead and guess that cactus seeds can drown pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely.
then regerminate. Go any place where there's been a flood. After the flood water goes down, the mud out there, things start to sprout very quickly.
Yeah, but Kent, there were plants of the same species that weren't drowned. Like, you realize you're talking about having every single member of every species of plant flooded for, according to you, at least a month. And all of their seeds having nowhere to go except the water.
Floating on the water.
Actually, many countries depend upon the annual floods to give them a new layer of sediment, new
I'll take a drink, that's true.
layer of topsoil. And they come in and build dikes and levees, and now the soil gets depleted after a time.
But Kent, in those countries, they don't just leave the seeds in the soil during the flood. They store them above the flood level and then plant the seeds. Like, you're aware how floodplain... No, of course he's not aware how floodplain farming works. Why would he even ask?
Maybe he's thinking like, well, rice paddies are flooded, so it's fine.
Well, the thing is, rice is a plant that actually depends on absurdly high amounts of water. That's why in the U.S., where it's grown, is actually places like around the Mississippi, where you can get reliable water into various irrigation systems. Like,
Yeah.
It's one of the problems in along the central part of the United States. But the tree ring dating, I just want to point out, is certainly not an exact science.
Oh, I forgot we were talking about tree rings. We went so far afield from that.
But the oldest one they've counted clearly and pretty certainly
Is
is
there anything
40.
that is an exact science?
No, nothing is an exact science.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you make a measurement in science, you're going to have an error bar. It's because science isn't exact. The only things in science that are exact are things that are definitional, like the speed of light in metric is defined as a certain number of meters per second.
Or like the
Which
definition
actually
of a
means...
second.
Well, yeah. But that actually means that the speed of light in meters per second is precisely defined. But what we now don't know is how long a meter is for certain. The exact length of the meter is now uncertain. You have to measure it with light. So yeah, now if you check the speed of light in meters, you're actually measuring the length of the meter, not the speed of light. So still, not actually exact.
300 rings. Assumption is 4,300 years. It's that at a maximum, probably less than that as far as its age. So the creationist has no problem with the oldest tree, says, hey, the flood was 4,400 years ago. Not a problem.
I mean, sure, it's fine that you don't have a problem with the oldest tree, right? Like, but the thing is, it's no more meaningful than saying that the creationist has no problem with the oldest Lego set. Like, okay, you found a thing that formed after you think the flood was. Yay!
Well, and then the Methuselah's tree is actually older than that.
Well, I wasn't even going to check because it didn't matter, but now that you say that and that's the case, that's awesome. Also, we have for $5.
48, 51, and it's not it might be the oldest living tree right now, but it's not even the oldest. The Great Basin Bristlecone pine, one that was like 9,000 years old.
Awesome. So
It's
we
not
now
alive
have.
anymore.
So we've got trees that they're themselves older than the age that Kent thinks the universe is. That's amazing. Also, for $5 from Vandalia 1998, we have, because when we have too much rain, farmers totally can plant their crops. Yeah, too much rain will in fact ruin crop planting season. And, of course, he sent a Mothra emoji, so we drink. Thank you, Vandalia1998, both for your super chat and being a member of the channel. By the way, guys, if you want to be a member of the channel, it's $1.99. There's a join link. Go for it. You can gain you'll have to email me about it or send me a message on Discord or something. But I'll put you in the members and patrons only Discord, and that will also give you access to videos early, and now apparently a Minecraft server, which my patron set up.
How many people are in the channel right now? I'm not seeing.
I don't know what that means.
Or how many people are watching that? Is that what I meant?
I see 26 viewers right now.
Okay, because we've got 30 likes, so that's good.
I'm only seeing 29. Yeah, hit like if you haven't.
This is a picture of a coral reef going underwater. The largest.
I'll take a drink. Kent got it right.
Also, clonal trees. Pando is less than 14,000 years, but Jurupa oak is 13,000 years old.
Nice.
Read about clonal trees if you haven't.
Yeah, clonal trees are really cool.
This reef in the world is in Australia. It's called the Great Barrier Reef. That'll be a quiz question. Where's the largest reef in the world, and what's the name of it?
These quizzes are like
great.
not really testing anything.
No, they're not. They're trivia.
No, yeah.
Great Barrier Reef is, I believe, 1,500 miles long. I should have looked that number up, but it's something like that. 1,500 miles of coral.
Who cares?
Absolutely gigantic. We went out and saw it. Eric was there, and Marlissa and my wife.
You make a point.
I mean, to be fair, I care. That's really cool, but like, it doesn't add to any point that he's making.
Ken Andrew, we saw the Great Barrier Reef, and it's extremely impressive to watch it. Just
It's decreasingly impressive.
beautiful, the stuff down there. We took one of those glass-bottom boats out, and you can see all the fish down there. Well, during World War II, some of the reef was damaged because there are very few places you can get through the reef to get ships in and out. You don't want to drive 1,500 miles to go around the reef.
It's almost like that's why they call it a barrier reef.
So they just blasted holes through it. Now, based on the damage done to the reef, when they watched it regrow over the next 20 years, they did a study on this. They said the Great Barrier Reef is less than 4,200 years old. There's a great article in Creation magazine dealing with this. One of their figures they came up with was 3,700 years. This is the new Creation magazine, but if you want some fascinating reading, it's like $22 a year to get Creation magazine. It's through Ken Ham's ministry up in Florence, Kentucky.
How old it is if it's already underwater?
I don't know what his point is. Unless it's just another, hey, we found a thing that is younger than I think the universe is, therefore the universe can't be old.
If it's older than 4,400 years or younger, it wouldn't matter because it's underwater now still. Like, I don't know what point I'm trying to think of what point Kent might
Also,
be trying to make.
He's also probably referring to the current form of the barrier reef, because according to the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, the earliest evidence of complete reef structures have been found for 600,000 years ago.
Yeah, and apparently the current reef is around 8,000 years, so like all of this is nonsense.
South of Cincinnati. The article in Creation magazine is in volume 8, number 1 on page 6. It was an older issue. It'd be almost worth, if you had the money, to get all the back issues. They've been doing this for 10 years, so it cost you $200 or something like that. But they're really excellent articles in here, if you want to look through one of those. Probably, if I could only afford a couple of things to subscribe to, I would subscribe to Creation magazine. I can give you the number if you want to write it down. It's 800-350-3232. 800-350-3232. Or their website is answersingenesis.org. O-R-G. And I don't agree with everything they put in here, but most of the time it's just really fascinating stuff and well documented. So, great article about the Great Barrier Reef, if you want to read more on that, would be found in this back issue of Creation magazine. And they said one of the studies showed 3,700 years. Now, some of the scoffers have tried to say, no, reefs can grow, they grow slower than that. And they look at, I think it's the one of the reefs in the Pacific Ocean around one of the islands. I believe it's Bikini Atoll, if I'm not mistaken, where they say they drill down in the
Drink for Godzilla.
reef and pull up a core sample of reef and find out the coral has layers to it, sort of like tree rings, as colonies grow on top of old colonies. And they say it's much older than the creationists allow for. This would be what the skeptics will tell you. Okay, Several factors affect coral growth.
I do like how
If a coral reef is farther from the surface of
he
the water,
refers to the consensus of science as the skeptics.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair,
Stop being
scientists are usually skeptical, and for good reason. Oh, turn for Godzilla.
Right, but it's a rhetorical tactic. I mean, like they're the ones on the outside just trying to be contrarian.
Yeah. Plus, the idea that skeptics would be a bad thing to be, like, no. You should be skeptical and then believe things that have good evidence, and if your ideas have good evidence, Kent, then skeptics will believe them.
Well,
it grows faster. As it approaches near the surface, because the tide's going up and down, the coral is exposed for part of the day. Now the growth rate slows way down. So the rate of growth depends very much on how much nutrition it's getting. If it's near an area where there's a river coming out right at that area, like one of these Australian rivers exits right there, brings all sorts of nutrients out. Lots of stuff for the coral to eat. It's going to grow faster. If it's not near a river, it's going to grow slower. If the water is clear, the sunlight penetrates, and it gets sunlight, so it's going to grow faster. If the water's murky, it's not going to get the same growth rate. So it's not just a simple science of saying, let's just measure it, and it's not quite that simple. But the estimates are certainly less than 4,200 years. Some maybe even less.
But they're not, though. That's the thing. You Google age of the Great Barrier Reef, and the first thing that comes up is 8,000 years. Like...
Now, to be fair, I think in this case he was referring to the core samples of the Bikini Atoll, and he might be trying to play fast and loose and conflate the two.
Well, he's saying that the Bikini Atoll core samples give ages that are too old for the Great Barrier Reef if you take those growth rates and apply it to the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay.
It's 3,700 years. So the creationist has no problem with this. He says, yeah, there was a flood that destroyed the world 4,400 years ago. This is Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls, this textbook tells the kids, has been eroding for 9,900 years.
We've already had this one, and I don't really want to address it tonight, and since it's already pretty close to wrap-up time, I'm going to go ahead and say, Bent, is there any last words or anything you would like to plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, coppermagma.com. We got, let's see. We're recording more, I think, a week from Sunday. We're getting pretty close to having our LP out. Yeah, that's going to be, I think, 10 songs. We haven't decided. It might be 9, but I think it's going to be 10. You guys are going to love it. And it's going to be free. But you have to download it. We're not mailing you compact discs.
Why not?
Because you don't want to.
Okay, that's fair. All right, Josh.
You don't want it to cost us any money.
Yeah. Josh, what do you got?
I don't normally have something to plug, but there is a soft date for me to be on a socialism versus capitalism debate on Modern Day Debate, March 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're interested in either that topic or seeing me in a debate in general, check it out. Or don't. Whatever.
Okay. Let's see. Channel stuff. So this Thursday, I believe I will be uploading the Answers or the Answers News video that I did. I am hard at work making a bunch of scenes for the Speculative Evolution project. I have, let me count. 1, 2, 5, I think, models, maybe 6, that I've completed for various species, but because I want to actually integrate them into scenes together, I haven't actually put them on the world anvil or finish the scenes. But now that I actually do in fact have that, all that stuff's going to come together. Hopefully, I almost broke my computer earlier today, so I'm going to have to do some tweaking. But yeah, so hopefully that will mean that the next video I record can be another Speculative Evolution project video. I don't have anything for this Saturday scheduled as of now. That could change. Hey, if you know a former Young Earth creationist who wants to do a Leaving Young Earth Creationism, let me know. And of course, as always, you never know when there's going to be like a random after show, because like Modern Day Debate or Steve McRae or some other debate channel does a creation evolution debate or something like that I'm interested in having the after show for. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And other than that, I will see you guys hopefully on Thursday. And thank you very much for everyone who came and hit like, And also, I want to say a special thank you to Mr. Wilford and Vandali1998 for super chatting. Your guys' super chats really do help out the channel. They not only give me motivation to keep going, but they also, you know, help pay for groceries and things like that. So thank you very much. And I will talk to you guys later as I get out of here with the end credits. I'd like to just take a moment to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above: Ben Tovand, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, and The Venerable Bede. My channel members and patrons help make this a much more stable income, because as you might know, ad income varies wildly from month to month, even with the same number of views. And it really helps this channel stay on the air. But if a monthly pledge, or a yearly pledge, which I have now activated, isn't right for you, there's a merch store linked in the description, and every like, share, and subscription really helps the channel grow. Also, starting this month, those pledging $10 or above will have access to free 3D art assets, including materials and models, which will be made for Blender by me and can be used in any project without crediting me